One of the people who will be basically walking over that article of impeachment later tonight, delivering the Democrats' case, impeachment manager and Congressman Eric Swalwell, Democrat from California. Congressman Swalwell, thank you very much for being on the show again. Good morning.
Good morning, Hallie.
So a lot of questions for you here about just kind of laying out the facts of what's going to happen in this impeachment trial. And let me start with some of the pushback that we've heard from those that you're trying to convince, Republican senators who you are looking to get on board with the potential conviction of the former president. We've heard some questions now about whether or not, according to these senators, they actually have the constitutional authority to convict somebody who's no longer in office. Let me play for you a bit of what we've heard from them.
I think it's a moot point, because I think right now Donald Trump is no longer the president. He is a former president.
I think the trial is stupid. I think it's counterproductive. We already have a flaming fire in this country, and it's like taking a bunch of gasoline and pouring it on top of the fire.
I think a lot of Americans are going to think it's strange that the Senate is spending its time trying to convict and remove from office a man who left office a week ago.
Do you plan to address the constitutional authority, as has been raised by some of these Republicans, for the House to bring an impeachment against somebody and for the Senate to convict somebody who's no longer serving?
It's constitutional. The Senate is steeped in tradition and custom, and I think it would be persuasive to them that they have actually done this before. They've held a trial for somebody who was no longer in office. And I think it's because the Constitution says that
You're talking about the Secretary of War?
That's right. Secretary of War, Belknap. We'll all hear that name more than we probably want. But it's because the founders put as one of the penalties disqualification from office. And because Donald Trump, we know, will do this again, has such a disdain for democracy and a disdain for public safety, we can't afford as a country to give him a chance to even come close to doing this again.
So it sounds like then, as the impeachment management team, and I'm not asking for specifics on the strategy, but it sounds like you will be addressing then this question of constitutional authority. Fair to say?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Let me ask you about witnesses then. We saw witnesses, obviously, in that first impeachment trial. This second one, the witnesses are many of the people who will be in the very chamber you will be sitting at. Do you expect members of Congress potentially to testify, since they're the ones who saw this whole insurrection go down?
But we'll be ready, for whatever the Senate rules allow. As you pointed out, this is unique. No trial, perhaps ever, has had jurors who were also witnesses, jurors who were victims, jurors who ran for their lives. I sent text messages that I don't really like reading again to my wife about the uncertainty of the situation. And I imagine almost all of those senators did the same thing. They know what Donald Trump said. They know the power of his words. And they know that once he assembled the rally, inflamed the rally goers, and incited the mob, it was their lives that were at risk.
So if the Senate rules allow, then, would you like to call witnesses, members of Congress, to come up and testify?
I'll leave that to us as a team to decide, and look forward to sharing that with you very shortly, Hallie.
OK, let me ask about timing then. We've heard that it might be a pretty quick trial here, a day for the defense, a day for prosecution, a day for questions. Is that an adequate time frame for you?
Again, we'll be ready whatever rules allow. We could be in trial tonight if we were allowed to. As a team, we're ready. And again, this case, our president invited and assembled this mob. He told this big betrayal of a lie, a betrayal of the Constitution, that his supporters could stop a steal. And then he inflamed them and then sent them to the Capitol. And I think just as powerful as what he did is what he didn't do. Once they arrived, once they beat, spit on, stampeded over police officers, he said nothing for over 2 hours.
Safe to say that it sounds like, Congressman, you're laying out what potentially might be some of the argument you will make to these senators. Again, could you do it in a 3-day time frame if that's what the rules say? Are you confident that you could get done what you need to do in that condensed time period?
We're confident that we can persuade the jury to convict with whatever amount of time they give us. And I'll leave it to the Senate to set the rule. We've got the evidence.
Couple more questions for you. There's some questions, I think, over who is actually going to preside over this trial here. We know, obviously, last time it was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court who did that. That was for somebody who was obviously in office. Now we're talking about a former president, which might mean that others, maybe Vice President Harris, maybe Senator Leahy could preside. Have you heard who will be presiding, and do you have a preference?
No, I haven't heard. And again, Hallie, we're ready for whoever's sitting in that chair. And we think it's less about who's sitting in that chair and more about the person that incited this attack that led to the loss of life.
I want to get your reaction to this explosive reporting in the New York Times over the weekend that NBC News has confirmed sort of the broad outlines of. Basically, the Times writing that the president and a DOJ lawyer had been working on this plan to oust the acting Attorney General, Jeff Rosen, to, quote, wield the department's power to try to force Georgia state lawmakers to overturn its presidential election results. That effort was ultimately unsuccessful. A Trump advisor did not directly deny it. Is this going to factor into your impeachment trial strategy here? Do you expect to include this reporting in the arguments you will make?
What I can say is this is powerful motive evidence, evidence that the president had a motive to remain in office at all costs, whether it was this effort at the Department of Justice, the effort to persuade the Georgia Secretary of State to find votes. He had a motive to stay in office, and he intended to use his supporters, again, who he would invite, who he would inflame, and then who he would incite to attack the Capitol. And that's all powerful evidence that'll be presented to these jurors. And it's going to be up to them as to whether they believe that those words led to the actions that saw them running for their lives, their desks ransacked, and their hallowed chamber, which will be the crime scene in the courtroom, desecrated.
One of your colleagues was mentioned, Pennsylvania Republican Scott Perry, in that piece as being involved in that. Do you believe that he should face consequences?
Well, there's likely going to be a criminal investigation, into all of this, I imagine, and I'll let prosecutors look at what his conduct was, and then the House, will play our own role. But right now, my focus, Hallie, and the impeachment team's focus is the one person who caused all of this. If Donald Trump, after, say, 30 losses in court, had accepted the outcome and not used language like fight, don't show weakness, calling his supporters a cavalry, had he not done any of that, this attack on the Capitol would not have happened.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.